What would you do if you came home early one day and heard your wife's voice coming from your bedroom? Talk to someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Not angry, not scared. Intimate. Would you walk in immediately? Would you call out? Or would you freeze, the way I did? Standing in the hallway of the house you'd lived in for 15 years, trying to make your brain accept what your gut already knew. I'm 61. My wife Teresa is 58. We'd been married 28 years, and on February 12, 2026, I stood outside our bedroom door, grocery bags still sitting on the kitchen counter, listening to her laugh with someone else. The kind of laugh I remembered from when we were dating. Warm, unguarded, real. The door was cracked open maybe 2 inches, just enough to see shadows, just enough to hear everything. His voice was lower than mine, familiar in a way that sent ice through my chest. Then I heard my name. Not the way you say your husband's name with affection. The way you talk about an obstacle, a problem, something in the way. Before I tell you what I did next, you need to understand who I was before that moment. This story starts with silence, but not the kind that brings peace. Before we begin, leave a comment. Have you ever had to choose yourself over someone you loved? Your answer might help someone else today. Quick note, some details are fictionalized for storytelling. What truly matters is the message about courage and freedom. I came home early on February 12th, and that decision cost me everything I thought I had. The trust meeting wrapped faster than expected. At 60. I'd spent 3 decades managing the Prescott family trust with quiet precision. No drama, just steady hands on the $3.2 million legacy my father left. The February afternoon was clear as I let myself into our Medina house. Empty rooms. Teresa would be at the gallery until 6, managing wealthy collectors and overpriced art. Then I heard her laugh. It came from my study, down the hall. Not her polished gallery laugh, something warmer. A man's voice answered her, low, unfamiliar. I moved toward the sound, keys still in hand. The study door stood slightly open, afternoon light slicing through the crack. Through the gap, I saw my wife, Teresa Prescott, 58, had built her reputation directing Bellevue's most exclusive gallery, where appearances were currency, and she'd learned to spend them well. She sat on the edge of my desk, one hand resting on the shoulder of a man I vaguely recognized. Bryce Hewitt, 45, wealth management advisor. I'd seen him at charity events, telling wealthy people how to protect their money. Their body language told a story I didn't want to read. The way she leaned toward him, the way his hand rested on her knee. When this is over, we won't have to hide anymore, Teresa said. Bryce smiled. How long until you think he'll agree to sign? He won't agree, my wife replied. That's why we filed a challenge first. My throat closed. The challenge? 30 years. That's how long I'd believed in this marriage. I pressed against the wall, forcing myself to breathe quietly. Every instinct screamed to burst through that door, but something kept me frozen. The asset valuation came through, Bryce continued, pulling papers from his briefcase. Once you're co-trustee, the Medina property alone gives you leverage, forced liquidation within 90 days of filing. My house. He was talking about selling my house. Teresa leaned forward. And my attorney says the filing looks airtight. Gerald's father structured the trust loosely. Exactly. Old language. No modern protections. You'll petition for co-administration based on financial transparency concerns. The court will grant it, especially with the narrative we're building. Narrative building. These weren't words for marriage. These were words for schemes. You need to understand something. This wasn't about love or passion. This was about $3.2 million. This was about my father's legacy. The trust he'd built across 3 generations, the careful stewardship I'd maintained for 3 decades. This was theft. dressed in legal language, and whispered in my own study. "The timeline?" Teresa asked. Bryce checked his phone. "Your attorney files next month. Service of papers mid-April. General will have 30 days to respond, but by then, the preliminary injunction freezes any trust distributions. You'll have effective control while litigation proceeds, and he'll never see it coming until the paperwork is filed," Teresa said, satisfaction in her voice. I stood there, in my own hallway, invisible, while my wife and her accomplice planned to strip me of everything my father built. My hands had gone numb. My chest felt hollow. The question wasn't whether I'd heard enough. The question was what I was going to do with what I knew. I didn't confront her. Not that night in the hallway. Not the next morning over coffee. Not once in the 72 hours that followed. Instead, I watched. I learned. I waited. February 13th, Thursday morning. I kissed Teresa goodbye like I'd done for 28 years. She smiled. Asked if everything was all right with the trust paperwork. I told her it was fine. Just routine quarterly reviews. She said she'd be late that night. Donor event at the gallery. "Don't work too hard," she added, touching my shoulder with the practiced affection of a woman who'd long since stopped meaning it. I smiled back. The performance came easier than I expected. You might think I was being weak, staying silent while my wife plotted with her lover to steal everything my father built. You'd be wrong. Silence, when wielded correctly, is the sharpest weapon you own. Every hour she thought I was ignorant gave me time to understand the full scope of what they were planning. Every conversation where I played the oblivious husband was another piece of evidence I could gather. I wasn't paralyzed by shock. I was thinking 3 moves ahead. February 15th, Saturday evening. Teresa left for a gallery opening in downtown Bellevue. I watched her car disappear down our tree-lined street, then waited 30 minutes to be certain she wouldn't return for something forgotten. Her home office smelled like her perfume and old paper. I'd rarely entered this room, respecting her space the way she'd always respected mine. That courtesy felt absurd now. The desk drawer was locked. I found the key in her jewelry box, tucked behind earrings she never wore. Inside the drawer, manila folders labeled in her precise handwriting: estate planning, trust review, legal consultation. I pulled out the first folder. Printouts of the Prescott family trust documents, sections highlighted in yellow, margin notes in her handwriting, sole trustee challenge here, and no succession clause leverage point. She'd been studying my father's trust like a student preparing for an exam. I photographed every page with my phone, my hands steadier than they had any right to be. Then I turned to her laptop, sitting closed on the desk. The password prompt appeared. I tried our anniversary, June 14th, 1998. The screen unlocked. The irony didn't escape me. Her email application showed dozens of folders. One labeled simply B. I clicked it. Months of correspondence with Bryce Hewitt filled the screen. I scrolled through subject lines: trust vulnerabilities, attorney meeting notes, asset valuation updates, timeline confirmation. The earliest email was dated June 2025, 8 months ago. I opened the most recent exchange, dated February 10th, 2 days before I'd come home early and heard them in my study. Teresa had written, "Attorney confident about filing timeline. Need to confirm liquidation sequence. What goes first?" Bryce's response appeared below, "Once your co-trustee. The Medina house liquidates first. Highest value, cleanest sale. The $3, 2 million trust converts to liquid assets within 90 days of filing." Teresa's reply, "And he won't be able to stop it." Bryce, "Not without litigation that will cost him more than the house is worth." By the time his attorney responds to the filing, preliminary injunction will already freeze all trust activity. You'll have effective control. The house. They were going to take the house where I learned to walk, where my father died, where I'd built 30 years of what I thought was family. I sat in the glow of that laptop screen, reading email after email detailing the systematic dismantling of my life. Not just my money, not just my legacy, my home. The physical ground beneath my feet was already marked for sale in Teresa's spreadsheet future. And according to the dates in these emails, she'd been planning this for 8 months. 8 months of planning meant 8 months of evidence. I was about to find out just how thoroughly my wife had dismantled our life while I slept beside her. The emails had shown me their timeline. Now I needed to know what they'd already taken. I pulled open the bottom drawer of Teresa's desk, the one that had always been locked when I'd passed by her office. The key I'd found in her jewelry box turned smoothly. Inside, manila folders stacked in precise order. The first folder contained bank statements. Not our joint accounts, these were new. Accounts opened in August 2025, 6 months ago, in Teresa's name only. I traced the deposits with my finger. Small transfers from our joint checking. 800 here, 1,200 there. Never more than 2,000 at once. Amounts small enough to slip past automated alerts. By the time I reached the most recent statement, the total made my stomach turn. $47,000. Moved systematically, methodically, while I signed trust documents and managed quarterly reviews and trusted that the woman I'd married was who I thought she was. She hadn't just been planning to steal from me. She'd already started. I photographed every page, my hands steady despite the rage building in my chest. Then I reached for the next folder. This one was labeled Personal Assets in her neat handwriting. Inside, a receipt from a safety deposit box facility in Bellevue, dated November 2025, 3 months ago. The itemization list made me stop breathing. Emerald ring, antique setting, pearl necklace, 3-strand, diamond brooch, Art Deco period. My grandmother's jewelry, worth $80,000 at last appraisal. More than that in memory. My grandmother wore that emerald ring for 53 years. She gave it to me. Not us, to me. The week before she died. Because she wanted it to stay in the Prescott family. And Teresa had locked it away in a safety deposit box in her name only. Like stolen goods waiting to be fenced. These weren't marital assets. They were family heirlooms that predated our marriage by generations. Legally mine, morally untouchable. She'd taken them anyway. I closed that folder and reached for the last one. Leather-bound, expensive. The kind of journal you buy to look serious, important. I opened it. Not a diary, a script. The first entry was dated August 15th, 2025. The handwriting was Teresa's. Careful and considered. He refuses to let me have independent access to family funds. Classic financial abuse pattern, she'd written. Today, when I asked about the trust account balances, he said I wouldn't understand the investment strategy. Dismissive. Controlling. I'd never said that. Never. I flipped forward. October 3rd. Today he questioned why I needed $200 for personal expenses. The control is suffocating. I feel trapped in my own home. Lies. Careful, documented lies. Every page detailed some new instance of my supposed financial control, my isolation tactics, my use of money as power. Highlighted passages, margin notes. One said simply, "Attorney says this establishes grounds for emergency co-trustee petition." How do you fight someone who's rewriting history with a lawyer's highlighter? I turned to the final entry. February 11th. The day before I came home early and heard them in my study. Planning family meeting with Leora next week, Teresa had written. Time to help her understand what her father has become. She deserves to know the truth about financial abuse. She'll support the petition once she sees the pattern. They weren't just stealing my money and my home. They were coming for my daughter next. The family meeting arrived 8 days later. The hardest performance I'd ever given was that Sunday dinner smiling at my daughter, while her mother slowly poisoned her against me. Leora Prescott, 32, had inherited my optimism and her mother's social grace. It was a combination that left her believing every family conflict could be solved over dinner, which made her perfect for Teresa's purposes. She arrived at 6:30, carrying a bottle of wine and her usual bright energy, taking about her nonprofit's fundraising campaign before she'd even set down her bag. I hugged her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, knowing what was coming. Teresa's greeting was warmer than usual. Too warm. She kissed Leora's cheek, squeezed her hand, led her to the dining room like she was presenting something precious. Dinner started safely enough. Leora updated us on her Seattle projects, the donor cultivation strategies that were finally working, spring weather, Teresa's upcoming gallery exhibition, normal topics from normal times. The fundraising campaign is finally hitting targets. Dad, Leora said, her face animated. Your advice about donor cultivation really helped. Your father has always been good with money, Teresa said, her tone light but pointed. Very careful about it. I met her eyes across the table. Just experience. Leora's doing the real work. Teresa smiled. Then she pivoted. Leora, honey, have you ever wondered why your father handles everything alone? The trust, the investments, all of it. My daughter looked confused. I mean, he's the trustee. That's how Grandpa set it up. But don't you think it's strange that I don't have any access after 28 years of marriage? Teresa's voice carried just the right note of hurt curiosity. Every instinct screamed to defend myself. But defending meant revealing what I knew, and revealing meant losing the only advantage I had left. Mom and I were talking last week about transparency in family finances, Leora said, and my chest tightened. Last week? Teresa had already been working on her planting seeds, building the narrative before this dinner even happened. I just think in modern marriages, both partners should have equal access. Teresa continued. Don't you agree, Leora? My daughter nodded slowly. I mean, yeah, in principle. I cut a piece of chicken I couldn't taste. The trust structure requires a single administrator. That's not about access. It's about legal requirements. Legal requirements your father chose to maintain, Teresa said softly. He could change them if he wanted transparency. The word hung in the air. Transparency. As if I were hiding something instead of protecting what my father built. Leora looked between us, uncertainty crossing her face. She'd walked into this dinner thinking it was our normal monthly tradition. She was starting to realize it was something else. If you've ever had to smile while watching someone you love believe a lie about you, you know the kind of death I died at that table. Dinner ended early. Leora helped clear plates, the conversation shifting back to safer ground. But the damage was done. I could see it in the way she looked at me now. A new question mark, where certainty used to be. At the door, Teresa hugged our daughter close. I'm glad we can talk about these things, sweetheart, she said, her voice dropping to that intimate tone mothers use when sharing confidences. Sometimes I feel so isolated in my own home. Leora pulled back, concern flooding her face. Mom, if you're feeling controlled, that's not okay. Have you thought about counseling? You understand what it's like to feel powerless, don't you? Teresa whispered. I watched my daughter's face soften with sympathy. Watched 32 years of trust shift toward her mother's carefully constructed lie. Leora drove away, and I stood in the doorway, catching Teresa's reflection in the hallway mirror. She was smiling, not the warm mother smile she'd worn for our daughter. Something colder, sharper. The smile of someone who'd just won a crucial battle. And she was right to smile, because I'd just watched my daughter choose sides without even knowing there was a war. I couldn't just watch anymore. After that dinner, after seeing Teresa turn my daughter against me with lies I couldn't defend without revealing my hand, I knew waiting was over. I needed legal protection. I needed it now. The receptionist at Keller and Shore law offices thought I was there for estate planning. Routine. Boring. The kind of thing 60-year-olds do on Tuesday mornings. I'd told Teresa I had a dentist appointment. She'd barely looked up from her coffee. The receptionist led me to a conference room where Malcolm Shore was waiting, senior partner at Keller & Shore. He'd spent 30 years protecting family trusts from exactly the kind of predatory challenge I was facing. His handshake was firm, his eyes sharp. "Walk me through what you've discovered," he said, settling into his chair. "And don't spare details." I laid the folder on the table between us. "My wife has been planning to challenge my administration of our family trust while conducting an affair with a wealth advisor. And you have documentation of both." I opened the folder. Printed emails between Teresa and Bryce Hewitt spanning 8 months. Bank statements showing her separate accounts. Safety deposit box receipts for my grandmother's jewelry. The fabricated journal entries painting me as financially controlling. Malcolm didn't react with shock or judgment. He photographed each page methodically, asked precise questions. How long had I been trustee? What were the original terms my father established? Did Teresa have any legal claim to co-administration? I wasn't seeking defensive advice. I was launching an offensive. "Your father's will," Malcolm said, studying one of the documents. "Do you have the original language about trustee succession? Sole discretion of named trustee, which is me. Co-trustee requires my written consent." His expression shifted. "That's what I hoped you'd say." He stepped out to consult a colleague, leaving me alone with my folder of evidence and the coffee I couldn't drink. I walked to the lobby, needing air that didn't smell like leather and legal strategy. That's when I saw her. Colleen Garrett, 55, and 3 years into retirement from family law, was sitting by the reception desk reviewing papers for what looked like a different case. She glanced up, and recognition crossed her face. "Gerald Prescott," she said. "I haven't seen you in, 10 years?" "Colleen." The relief of seeing a friendly face nearly broke me. "God, it's good to see you." We moved to the coffee station. I told her enough, the affair, the trust challenge, the manipulation of Leora. She listened without interrupting. "Before I tell you what Malcolm discovered in that trust document, if you're still with me, comment one thing you'd do in my position. Confront now or wait." This next part includes some fictionalized details for storytelling, but the lesson about protecting what's yours is real. "Whatever you're dealing with," Colleen said quietly, "protecting yourself isn't betrayal. It's survival." Malcolm appeared in the lobby doorway. "Gerald, can you come back in?" I followed him to the conference room. He'd laid out several documents I recognized copies of my father's original trust establishment. The succession clauses, the administrative guidelines. "Your father built this trust specifically to prevent exactly what she's attempting," Malcolm said. "The language is ironclad. Without your written consent, no court can compel co-trustee's status. Her challenge has no legal standing." I sat down slowly. "So she can't touch it." Not only that, Malcolm tapped the folder of evidence I'd brought. "With this documentation of asset concealment, fraudulent journal entries, and conspiracy to misappropriate trust funds, you have grounds for counterfiling. Criminal fraud charges. Complete asset forfeiture in divorce proceedings." For the first time in 3 weeks, I could breathe. My father, dead 6 years, was still protecting me. "With this evidence," Malcolm said, meeting my eyes, "she won't just lose the challenge, she'll lose everything." I walked back to my car in the pale March sunlight, Malcolm's words echoing in my head. I had the power now. The trust was untouchable. The evidence was documented. And Teresa didn't know I knew any of it. The question was no longer whether I could protect myself. It was how long I could maintain the illusion of ignorance while the legal trap closed around her. The hardest part of knowing you've won is pretending you're still losing. Malcolm Shore had given me power, legal protection, a counter-strategy that would destroy Teresa's scheme completely. But that power changed me in ways I couldn't fully hide. 3 days after my meeting at Keller & Shore, Teresa noticed. We were having breakfast, the same kitchen, the same coffee, The same performance we'd been giving each other for weeks. Except I wasn't performing as well anymore. "You've been remarkably agreeable lately," she said, studying me over her cup. "Are you feeling all right?" I met her eyes. The woman who'd stolen from me, lied to me, plotted to take everything my father built, just trying to appreciate what we have while we have it. "That's unusually philosophical for you," I shrugged, returned to my newspaper. But I'd seen it, the flicker of suspicion crossing her face. My usual tension had vanished. The weight I'd carried since February 12th, when I first heard her voice in my study, had lifted. And she could tell. Winning had changed me. The knowledge that I held all the cards, that her scheme was already dead, and she just didn't know it yet. It had given me a calm I couldn't fully suppress. Hiding it required constant, conscious effort. You know what's stranger than discovering your spouse is stealing from you? Sitting across the breakfast table from them, smiling. When you know exactly how their theft ends. Over the following weeks, Teresa escalated her testing. March 15th. She mentioned the trust paperwork casually while we were watching television. "I've been thinking we should review the trust together. Transparency, you know." "Sure," I said. "We can schedule something after your spring exhibition." She watched my face for reaction. "You're not worried about me questioning your decisions, should I be?" The question hung between us. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. March 22nd. She suggested couples counseling. I agreed immediately, knowing we'd never make it to the first appointment. April 18th would arrive first. March 28th. She asked if I'd heard from any attorneys recently. My heart rate didn't change. No, why would I? "Just wondering," she said. "You've seemed different." Each conversation was a chess match. Each question a trap to gauge what I knew. I deflected perfectly, gave her enough rope, maintained the script. Meanwhile, Malcolm Shore was finalizing the counterfiling in the background, building the legal case that would expose everything. We were two actors in a play neither of us had written, waiting for different final scenes. April 10th arrived. I lay in bed beside Teresa, listening to her breathe in the darkness. She'd fallen asleep easily, still believing her timeline was intact, still thinking I was the oblivious husband who'd sign whatever she eventually presented. My phone glowed under my pillow. Malcolm's text from earlier that evening. "Service confirmed for April 18th, 4 p.m. Process server will deliver to residents. Everything is ready." 8 days. 8 days until the process server would knock on our door. 8 days until Teresa opened an envelope containing the counterfiling, the evidence of her theft, the documentation of her affair, the proof of her fabricated journal entries. 8 days until she discovered that while she'd been planning to file her trust challenge in late April, I'd already filed my response in early April, that her timeline was irrelevant, that I'd known since February 12th. And I'd been building my case while she thought I was sleeping. I turned my head on the pillow, watching her in the dim light filtering through the curtains. Teresa Prescott, 58, art gallery director, my wife of 28 years, the woman who'd tried to steal my family legacy. In 8 days, she'd know I'd won. 192 hours. 11,520 minutes until the process server would knock on our door and hand Teresa papers that would destroy everything she'd built. I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathe, counting down to the moment when 30 years of marriage would end, not with my surrender, but with her complete and total defeat. April 18th, 2026, 4 p.m. I stood in our living room, watching Teresa arrange chairs in a semicircle. She'd spent the morning preparing for what she called a family meeting, her ambush. "Lotage, sweetie, sit here," Teresa said, patting the sofa. Our daughter obeyed, confusion written across her face. Bryce stood by the mantel, avoiding my eyes. The coward couldn't even look at me. Teresa smoothed her dress, the blue one she wore to court appearances. Strategic. "Gerald, we need to discuss some changes." Adult decisions about our future. Her voice dripped with false concern. I checked my watch. 4:01 p.m. Todd Brennan was late. Todd Brennan, professional process server, had delivered thousands of legal documents, but never quite understood the earthquakes they caused. Cities. Mom, Leora asked. Teresa opened her briefcase, pulling out papers. Your father and I are separating. I've already filed the necessary paperwork to protect our family assets. The trust your grandmother left, /quote. The doorbell rang. Teresa frowned. I'm not expecting anyone. She looked at me. Are you? I'll get it, I said, walking toward the door. My heart hammered, but I kept my face neutral. Todd stood on the porch, manila envelope in hand. Gerald Prescott. That's me. You've been served. He handed me the envelope, then noticed Teresa approaching. Teresa Prescott. Her face went white. What? No, I already. You've been served. Todd handed her a second envelope. Have a nice day. He walked back to his car, whistling. Teresa tore open her envelope. I watched her eyes scan the first page, then the second. Color drained from her cheeks. What is this? She whispered. You're filing for divorce. You're claiming fraud, theft. Leora stood. Dad, what's happening? Bryce moved toward the door. I stepped in front of it. Sit down, Bryce, I said quietly. You don't get to run. Not this time. Gerald, you're making a mistake, Teresa said, her voice shaking. We can work this out. This is February 12th. I interrupted. That's when I found your laptop. Every email, every transfer, every lie. I turned to Leora, obbled. His mother has been planning to leave me for months. She stole $47,000 from our joint account. She sold your grandmother's jewelry, $80,000 worth, and kept the money. Teresa's hands trembled. That's not... You don't understand the full picture. Could understand she's been sleeping with Bryce. I continued. In our bed, while I was at work. Leora gasped. Uncle Bryce. Bryce lunged for the door. I didn't move. He stopped. Trapped between exposure and escape. The trust is protected, I said to Teresa. Malcolm Shore confirmed it. You can't touch Grandma Ruth's money. The forensic accountant has tracked every dollar you stole. The PI documented 73 visits Bryce made to our house while I was gone. Teresa sank into a chair. You knew all this time. Éxito, single day since February 12th. I smiled. I cooked. I slept beside you. I felt nothing looking at her now. And I built my case. Dad, Leora's voice broke. Is this true? All of it? I handed her my phone, opened to the email folder. Read it yourself, sweetheart. I won't lie to you, not like she did. Teresa lunged for Leora. Don't listen to him. He's twisting everything. I can explain. Explain the texts calling me the obstacle, I asked. Explain the journal you fabricated to make me look unstable. It's in my filing. Teresa. All of it. Bryce finally found his voice. Teresa, we need to leave. Now. She looked at him, then at Leora reading the emails. Tears streaming down our daughter's face. Get out, I said. Both of you. This is still my house until the judge says otherwise. Teresa grabbed her briefcase. At the door, she turned back. You'll regret this, Gerald. No, I said. I really won't. The door closed. Leora looked up from my phone, her eyes red. Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I sat beside her, finally allowing myself to breathe. Anywhere did, sweetheart. Neither did I. Well, winning. I discovered doesn't feel the way you imagine it will when you're lying awake at night planning your revenge. May 14th, 2026. The conference room at Keller and Shore smelled like furniture polish and old coffee. Sanders Whitfield, family court mediator for 18 years, had presided over hundreds of divorces, but this evidence of calculated fraud still made her wince. She spread the documents across mahogany. Mrs. Prescott, the evidence of pre-divorce asset concealment is substantial and uncontested. Teresa sat across from me, her attorney beside her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. My client made errors in judgment during a difficult period, her attorney began. Malcolm Shore didn't raise his voice. Your client executed an 8-month fraud. The court sees the difference. Sandra reviewed the timeline: 47,000 in transfers, 80,000 in sold heirlooms, fabricated journal, 73 documented visits. 2 hours to dissolve 28 years. I watched Teresa sign her name. Her hand shook. Victory tasted like nothing at all. Just exhaustion and the hollow recognition that winning still meant I'd lost 28 years to someone who never loved me the way I'd loved her. The Bellevue art community moved fast. Gallery board requested Teresa's resignation within a week. Donor calls went unreturned. Colleagues suddenly had scheduling conflicts when she appeared at openings. I said nothing, made no calls, sent no emails, offered no commentary. The fact spoke without my help, gallery director. Affair with wealth advisor. Scheme to defraud husband's family trust. Someone asked me at the grocery store if the rumors were true. I said, the court records are public, and moved to checkout. Justice doesn't require satisfaction. Sometimes it just requires silence. 28 years, 10,220 days of marriage. And it ended on page 7, paragraph 3, subsection B. May 20th. Leora met me at a coffee shop in Seattle, neutral territory. Her choice. She ordered chamomile tea she didn't drink. Hands wrapped around the cup for warmth. The room didn't lack. I'm sorry I didn't see what she was doing, she said. To you, to us, to the truth. I reached across the table. She's still your mother. What she did doesn't erase that. But what she did hurt you. Leora's eyes were red. And I'm choosing to stand with you. She told me about conversations with Teresa, the justifications, the reframing, the attempt to position herself as victim of my financial control. The false narrative built brick by brick. Trying to recruit our daughter as accomplice. You don't have to choose, I said. Yes, I do. Leora squeezed my hand. Love doesn't mean excusing everything. I can love her and still see what she did was wrong. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who stands beside you when the truth costs something. If you've ever ended something that should have ended years earlier, you know this feeling. Not sadness, but recognition that you're finally breathing right. May 28th. Malcolm delivered the final papers to the Medina house. I signed them at the kitchen table where I'd eaten breakfast for 28 years, pretending everything was fine. Once you sign, it's final, Malcolm said. 28 years, legally concluded. I picked up the pen gold-plated. Teresa's gift on our 10th anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. 28 years ended in February when I heard her voice through that door. I said, this just makes it official. My signature looked steadier than it had on our marriage certificate. More certain. Malcolm gathered the documents. How are you feeling? I expected grief, expected the weight of failure. The ache of everything we'd built crumbling into legal terminology and asset division. Instead, I felt relief. Profound, surprising, genuine relief. Free, I said. Not happy, not sad, not vindicated or destroyed. Just free. Malcolm nodded. He'd seen this before, the moment when ending something toxic feels like opening a window you didn't realize was closed. The house would sell. The trust remained secure at $3.2 million. Leora called every Sunday. Everything Teresa tried to take from me. I still had except her. And I was starting to understand that might be the best part. The third place books in Lake Forest Park smells like coffee and old paper. And for the first time in 4 months, I'm sitting in a chair without counting exits or calculating next moves. June 15th, 2026, Saturday afternoon. Colleen sits across from me, reading glasses perched on silver hair, hands wrapped around a ceramic mug that reads, "Retired and loving it." "You look different," she says. "Lighter, somehow." I consider the word. Like I've set down luggage I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it had weight. I feel like I've been holding my breath for a decade and finally remembered how to exhale. Colleen smiles, the kind that reaches eyes and means something. "Good. You deserve to breathe." We talk about books. She's reading historical fiction set in World War II France. I'm halfway through a thriller I can actually enjoy now that my own life isn't one. She tells me about her grandkids' summer camp disasters, and I laugh, really laugh. The kind that catches you by surprise. When did I last laugh like this? Before February, certainly. Maybe before last year entirely. The climbing wall incident involved one 9-year-old, 2 counselors, and the fire department, Colleen says, wiping tears. Don't ask. This is what happiness feels like. Not vindication or victory or watching someone who hurt you face consequences. Just genuine connection. Easy conversation. Laughter over nothing important. The first real happiness I've felt in years. At 3:30, Leora arrives. Our Sunday tradition relocated from Medina's formal dining room to this bookstore cafe. She orders chai, kisses my cheek, greets Colleen warmly. "The campaign hit our funding goal," she announces. "We're launching in August." Pride swells in my chest. "That's incredible, sweetheart." She updates us on nonprofit strategy, asks my opinion on donor cultivation. No hidden agenda. Just a daughter seeking her father's advice because she values it. Then, carefully, "I'm having lunch with Mom next week. Is that okay?" Here's what they don't tell you about starting over at 60. It's not about being young again. It's about finally being honest. "She's your mother," I say. "You don't need my permission to love her." Leora's shoulders relax. "But I wanted you to know I see the difference between loving her and excusing what she did. That's all I ever wanted." I squeeze her hand. "You don't have to choose sides. You just have to know the truth." Colleen excuses herself to browse fiction. Leora and I talk about boundaries, about maintaining minimal contact with Teresa on her own terms. "She's trying to rewrite what happened," Leora says quietly, casting herself as the victim. I listen, but I don't agree. That's the boundary. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who stands in truth with you when truth costs something. Evening. I return to my 2-bedroom condo in Kirkland, 1/3 the size of the Medina house. Bought with my own money, decorated to my taste. No marble countertops, no grand staircase, no rooms full of false memories. I stand at the window overlooking Lake Washington. The trust sat secure. The Medina house would close escrow in August. Leora called every Sunday, and I was learning that freedom isn't what you keep, it's what you stop carrying. My bookshelf holds volumes I actually want to read. Leora's photo sits beside Grandma Ruth's. Tomorrow's coffee date with Colleen is noted on my calendar, 9 p.m. I sit in the living room I furnished myself. Silence surrounds me. The same quality of silence that filled the hallway when I stood frozen outside my bedroom door in February. But this silence is different. That silence trapped me, held me paralyzed, forced me to perform a life I no longer believed in. This silence in my own home, my own chair, my own chosen solitude, sets me free. I can break it whenever I want. Call Leora, text Colleen, turn on music, or sit in it as long as I need, and it remains mine. Tomorrow I'll have coffee with Colleen. Call Leora about her campaign. Maybe start that novel. But tonight, I sit in the quiet I've earned. For the first time in 30 years, the silence feels like peace. And to you listening to my story, remember, this silence can trap you, or it can set you free. The difference is whether you choose it. Looking back on this drama family experience, I wish I'd acted sooner. Not in confrontation, but in honoring my own worth. I spent 61 years building a life I thought was solid, only to discover the foundation was sand. Don't make my mistake of confusing loyalty with denial. When someone shows you who they are through their actions, believe them the first time. Your peace matters more than preserving a comfortable lie. This drama family story taught me that revenge isn't about destruction. It's about choosing yourself. Every husband revenge tale you hear might sound like it's about defeating someone else, but the real victory is reclaiming your own life. I believe God put me through this test to show me that freedom comes from truth, not performance. The years I spent weren't wasted. They taught me exactly what I didn't want to carry forward. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go of what you thought you needed and build something real instead. If this revenge story resonated with you, leave a comment. Have you faced similar drama, family challenges? What would you have done? Your perspective might help someone struggling right now. If you found value here, share this husband revenge story with someone who needs it. Subscribe for more stories about truth, courage, and choosing yourself. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time means more to me than you know. As a final note, certain details in this revenge story have been fictionalized for storytelling and reflection. What's real is the message about courage, truth, and the freedom that comes from choosing yourself.